Azure Files, right? So they offer fully managed file shares in the cloud and that are accessible via SMB or NFS protocols. And Azure file shares can be mounted concurrently by cloud or on-premises deployments, and Azure file shares are accessible from Windows, Linux, and Mac OS clients, right? Um, so NFS Azure file shares are accessible from Linux or Mac OS clients, whereas SMB using the SMB protocol, the SMB Azure file shares can be accessed from those three clients, right? From Windows, Linux, and macOS, whereas NFS you can only access it from Linux or macOS. We're not talking about Windows, as far as I can see. And SMB Azure file shares can be cached on Windows servers with Azure File Sync for fast access near where the data is being used. So basically, uh, I guess just to recap, right? So from whatever we have learned so far, we're talking about two protocols. We're talking about SMB and NFS. And Azure files are like file shares, right? But hosted in the cloud. And and this can be mounted concurrently by cloud or by an on-premises deployment, right? And in terms of SMB, we're talking about it's supporting all three platforms. That is, or in terms of accessibility, I mean, you could access it from Windows, you could access it from Linux, you could also access it from Mac. And they also have an option for cached um, file shares can be cached on Windows Server with Azure File Sync. So, and whereas when talking about uh, NFS uh, protocol, it's only accessible from Linux or macOS clients. Now let's talk about the benefits of why one should use Azure Files, right? Let's talk about the key benefits. So, and looks like there are maybe six of them. I'm sorry, five of them. All right. So uh, now we're talking about shared access. So and again, we know it supports SMB and NFS protocols, and which means that you can seamlessly replace your on-prem file shares with Azure file shares without worrying about application compatibility. So, and shared access meaning access. I mean, you are literally having multiple users, you know, who have access to the file shares, and like in terms of user experience, it's going to be the same, and there's not going to be any kind of compatibility issues that 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 might happen. So, um, and the next one is fully managed. So file shares can be created without a need to manage hardware or an OS. So we don't need to worry about procuring servers or doing the networking in terms of the physical hardware or installing the OS or making uh, or or doing OS updates, right? So Exactly. So this means you don't have to deal with patching, servers, updates, whatever. So you don't need to worry about that. You just need to worry about, or just need to think about the functional aspect, like what functionality is Azure Files providing you, right? And then we're talking about scripting and tooling. So scripting, like once you think about scripts, you think about PowerShell, right? In terms of Windows, you're thinking about PowerShell commands, or um, and Azure CLI can be used to create, mount, and manage Azure file shares as part of the administration of Azure applications. And you can create and manage Azure file shares using the Azure portal and Azure Storage Explorer. So uh, so we can use scripting to create an Azure file share, to mount an Azure file share, to manage an Azure file share, and you can use the Azure. You can also use the Azure portal, or you can use the Azure portal and the Azure Storage Explorer. And in terms of resiliency, um, so they built to be always available. You don't need to worry about like power outages or network issues or anything related to hardware or networking, because it's all in the cloud managed by Microsoft. So that overhead is gone, right? In terms of worrying about setting it up, hardware failures, outages, so that's gone. So and it's built to be resilient, it's built to be always available. And the last one is familiar programmability. So applications running in Azure can access data in the share in the file share via a file system input output APIs, IO APIs. So and we're talking about programming, we're talking about development, right? So developers can therefore leverage their existing code and skills existing to migrate existing applications, right? Through the APIs. And in addition to system IO APIs, you can use Azure Storage Client libraries, um, or the Azure Storage REST API. So like I said, this is for developers, and basically if you want to um, migrate existing applications, you could do that. So with the help of APIs. Um, so that is it for Azure Files.